When was your gut feeling actually right? When I was pregnant for the first time, something just felt off. I knew from the very beginning it wasn't going to end well. A few weeks later, I started cramping and spotting, which can be normal in early pregnancy. I ended up going to the ER. They couldn't find any evidence of a pregnancy in my uterus and decided it was a missed miscarriage and wanted to send me home. But that gut feeling that something was very wrong was still there, and I listened to it. I demanded that I be seen by my OB, who was head of obstetrics at that hospital, and wouldn't leave until he saw me. He had me in emergency surgery 4 hours after he came to examine me to remove my ruptured fallopian tube and stop the internal bleeding. Had I not listened to my gut, I'd be dead. Was driving. Got an odd feeling about this car behind me. No telltale signs. The lady wasn't texting or anything. So I moved lanes and got a car ahead of her. Rear-ended that car promptly at the next light. I do that too. Get a strange feeling about another driver on the road and feel a need to get away from them, either by dropping back or detouring. Don't know if it's ever saved me, but I feel a lot safer away from them. Back when I was about 10 or 11, I asked my mother if we could take my grandmother out to lunch. She was kind of against it, but I kept insisting that I really wanted to see my grandmother and that she would want to go to lunch that day. While we were out at the mall after getting lunch with my grandmother, she started slurring her speech and became extremely confused. She was having a stroke. Luckily, my mom noticed what was going on and got her to the hospital within 20 or 30 minutes. Doctors said they were able to stop the stroke and she came out of it basically the same as she was before. A couple days after the fact, my mom told me I had basically saved my grandmother's life by making sure we went out to lunch with her that day. That was lucky. Could have been a lot worse. Growing up, I was always wary of my uncle on my dad's side of the family, not blood related. Even as a young child, I just knew that I didn't like being around him. He never gave me any reason to feel this way, and I never voiced it to anyone. As I grew older, my family moved away and I saw less of him, but anytime my extended family met for holidays I would see him and avoid him. Couple years down the track, I was around 12 or 13 when my parents sat me and my older brother down and told us that my cousin, my uncle's daughter, had been raped and molested by him from a young age. This had all come to light when my aunt caught it happening. Later found out she was abused by him too. Really wish my gut feeling hadn't been right about that one. I feel this one. Only my sociopath uncle was so good at passing. I just knew my grandmother's house made me feel intensely anxious. I moved the heck away as soon as I graduated high school. Later found out he's a serial pedo. It was 1995. I was 18, still living with my parents, and I was walking home from a friend's house at about 2 AM in the middle of the summer. He only lived 5 or 6 blocks away, and we often hung out watching movies after I got off work. Usually I would drive to his house because we'd been out with other friends, but this night I had parked at home and we walked to his place. There's not usually a lot of traffic between our houses, but this night I was about halfway home when a pickup truck drives by with 2 guys in the cab and 2 in the bed. I immediately felt like I was in danger. I saw the truck turn the corner, and I dove over some hedges in the closest yard I could find. I hid under them. I saw the truck come back around the corner and slowly drive down the street. When it got to where I was hiding, I heard one of the guys say, "Where did he go?" and another respond that he didn't know. They kept driving, and I didn't see them again. I stayed hidden for a good 15 minutes before getting up and running the rest of the way home. I'm certain they would have jumped me if they found me. Twice, while delivering pizza to shady neighborhoods, things didn't look right. I trusted my instincts and booked. Both times, no one ever called back to ask about their food never arriving. That's all the proof I need. I'll never understand the idea of robbing a pizza person. You're robbing, possibly assaulting and or killing a working man-woman for what is probably $20 or less. I've hung around with gang members and some pretty rough types, but none of them ever told me they did that. Driving in Pittsburgh, I stop at a red light. Hill goes up on my left, downhill on my right. Poor visibility to the left. The light turns green, but my brain tells me, hey bud, wait a sec. I think this is a little weird, but I don't go yet. A millisecond later, a massive navy blue F-350 comes barreling downhill through the intersection from my left, blowing past the red light at about 45, then trundles down the hill. If I'd have gone, I would have been destroyed by 3 tons of Ford truck, for sure. Instead I trusted the spider sense. Bonus story. I was going down a hill on some 2-lane highway when at the bottom of the hill I noticed there was a bus stop. For some reason, the bus wasn't pulled over to the side to pick people up, so he was blocking the entire right lane. I have to hit the brakes, partly due to speed, and mostly because I can't go around him because traffic is flying by on the left. As I'm waiting 10 feet behind him for a break and the cars in the left to go, something in the back of my mind says I bet someone else doesn't see that bus. So I look in my rear view and sure enough, there's a white Toyota Tundra, another truck, barreling toward me way too fast. No time for thinking. Jay just hit the go button and swing my car to the right to try to move onto the shoulder, reasoning being that it'll mitigate the impact a little. I was right. The lady hit me, bounced me around and sent my phone flying, but when we got out and inspected our vehicles, neither were damaged. She apologized. I just was thrown off by that bus. I reassured her it was fine. We bumped elbows and continued. I used to be a member of the subreddit WPD. There were tons of accidents like that. I've learned to wait at least a second before going on a green light. I stopped at Home Depot to pick up an item so I knew it was going to be a quick trip. I'm in the store and notice I'm pretty much the only girl in there besides employees. I couldn't find what I was looking for and had to ask multiple employees before I found it. I check out and as I'm heading out to my car I notice a shady dude standing against a tree on one side of my car. On the other side of my car is another shady guy sticking his arm outside of his car window. When I walked out they both turned and stared at me. My heart dropped. I started to feel queasy, and my mind instantly knew to turn around and go inside. I stood there shaking at the front of the store until I could get the courage to ask an employee to walk me to my car. As soon as they saw me walking out with an employee, the guy standing by the tree walked around my car and into the driver's side of the car parked next to me. To this day I swear I was a short walk away from being kidnapped. This sounds horrifying. We're all glad you trusted your instincts. When I was a kid, I was doing my first ever deep clean of my bedroom, getting rid of old clothes and toys and such. While cleaning out my closet, I found an old picture cut out from the local newspaper of Lyndon Johnson visiting my parents' hometown. The picture was taken outside with some locals in the background. I was going to throw the picture away, but suddenly got the strongest feeling not to do it, so I set it aside. Later I showed it to my mom and asked her about it. She freaked out and showed my grandma, who also freaked out. Turns out one of the locals in the background of the picture was my grandpa. He died when my mom was 12. That picture was one of only a handful we had of him. I had never seen a picture of him before this. I was so glad I didn't throw that clipping away. Finally, a cute story that isn't about rape or gang murders. Used to work in the air. Had a man come in with ripping chest pain that started not but 30 minutes prior after he moved something heavy at his office. I knew he was going to die just by looking at him. Massive overwhelming dread just seemed to engulf me. I did his EKG and I hoped something would be wrong with it so we could get him a bed. His EKG was perfect. Not 5 minutes later he went into cardiac arrest on our waiting room floor. After running the code for 45 minutes, he didn't make it. He had a massive aortic dissection. There wasn't much hope. This was almost 3 years ago and I've seen more crap since then, but the memory is still burned in my mind, and it hurts knowing I was the last person to speak to him. There are a bunch of bars right next to my university here where I live. At the start and the end of the semester everybody, thousands of students, start gathering around the street where most bars are located and just parties all night. On one of these occasions, in 2019, it was the end of the semester. I had just got there a bit late because I was working on the lab at the uni, and the moment I got there something just didn't feel right. The people there, how they were acting, how they were moving, how they were talking, something felt different in the air. We were crossing through the giant group of people since we were looking for my girlfriend at the time and the people who we were expecting to meet there. I froze in place and I can't really explain why to this day, but I just felt something really bad was about to happen and my friend noticed how I was too attentive and kind of in panic. He snapped me out of it and I told him that we needed to find everyone and leave that place. For my surprise he just agreed. I think he noticed something was wrong with me and probably just went for it so I could calm down. My girlfriend and our friends didn't take long to find and they were confused because I was acting so erratic and I was kind of having a panic attack. But they eventually followed me out of the crowd and right as we were out of the bar area we started hearing a bunch of gunshots and people started screaming. Shortly after the police was rushing into the area. What happened was that some gang members decided to use the party to settle some score, probably hoping the crowd would help them get out unnoticed. 5 people were killed and 3 injured that day. The police apparently caught them but I'm not sure about that part. After that those periodical parties at this street were never the same. Way less people and now they don't even close the streets anymore because it's not that big of a crowd. Who would have thought? To this day my friends like telling this story about how I saved their lives and, on rare occasions, someone asks me if I knew about the gang fight that was going to happen or something like that. I honestly don't know what triggered me that day, but myself and the people with me are really glad I did. I think I might have caught view of a gun while crossing the crowd and didn't consciously notice it but kicked some sense of danger on me. I have read about unsuspecting soldiers instinctively getting triggered and ready to fight while walking into ambushes even though there are seemingly no indications of it. I had been living and working in Korea, and one day I was coming up out of a subway station and saw a man talking to another foreign woman. She had that polite, frozen smile on her face. The "why is this guy talking to me" smile. I walked up to her, linked my arm with hers, and said, "Hey, Sarah, there you are. Are you ready to go?" and just started walking. The guy followed us, but I sped up and made an abrupt turn into a coffee shop. We hid, and I saw him walk past, still looking for her. We ended up getting coffee and chatting for a bit, and I found out that he had followed her off the train and had been getting increasingly aggressive for the last 10 minutes. I don't know what might have happened, but I'm really glad I interfered. Helped a victim of human trafficking get to a shelter. Context: I was a medical student at the time, now a resident, and the city my school was in is a hub for human trafficking. I noticed a patient in the ER who had a pretty bad injury to her face was with a sketchy looking guy who was not related to her. She wasn't my patient, but I brought my gut feeling up to her doctor who then made up some excuse to talk to the patient alone and got her to help. I never talked to her myself, but I couldn't shake the vibe I got from looking at her and the man she was with. You're the type of person who makes this world a better place. Thank you. It started out as a gut feeling when I felt that something was off about my mom's boyfriend. Once I felt this way, I started to notice the red flags. The first one was the way my dog reacted to him. Even to this day he's the only person my dog flat out didn't like. I think he might have even kicked him at one point when we weren't around. The next major red flag I noticed was that whenever his daughters came over, 6 and 8, they rarely wanted to spend time with their own father and would hang out with my mom. It almost felt like they were trying to avoid him. I ended up bringing my concerns to my mom and she started to notice things too and so broke it off with him. A few months later she gets contacted by an investigator. Apparently, the boyfriend had been caught trying to sleep with his current girlfriend's daughter so they wanted to get a statement from mom. I'm just glad he got caught and it sounds like he'll be in jail for quite some time. My mom's the only woman in the house so I don't think the dude was trying to come after my brother or I. Plus, we're both bigger than the man too. You two's presence is probably the only thing that saved our mother there from whatever stupidity this guy would have brought on her. Frick him. When I was a kid I had this teacher, I think grade 3, who was really creepy towards all of us girls. We would notice him looking at girls' butts or down their shirts. He was really weird and always found a reason to make girls stay after class for whatever. He gave me a really terrible feeling that I had never gotten from someone before. I never got too close to him and always made sure I wasn't in his room alone. I'm 25 now and he just got arrested last year for having child pornography and was also caught with a hidden camera in his pen that he would take pictures down girls' shirts with. So creepy. Can't imagine the amount of videos pics this man has. He was an older man when he taught me in grade 3 and just got caught last year. That being said, I guess there might be a pedophile in my school too. Gut feeling, though. All I got. Spent 2 years itching for no reason. Hypochondria. Gut told me it was cancer. Further research confirmed it for me. Told doctors for 2 years I had lymphoma. I was right, but they didn't figure it out until I was stage 4 advanced. When I was a young kid back in the 80s, I was playing on my front lawn when this van pulled up on the road and the sliding door opened. A guy about 19-20 aggressively waved at me to come to the van and I immediately knew something wasn't right, so I ran inside and told my parents and they freaked out and ran outside, but they were gone by then. Stranger danger wasn't really a thing back then and I had no idea what an abduction was at the time, but looking back on it, my life could have ended that day had I chose to go over to the van. I often wondered after that day if they ever did get a kid to get into their van. Wow, that's weird. Stranger danger was huge where I grew up, SF Bay Area, and I was born in 1976. Good on you for spotting scum. Last year, I was staying up late watching Rick and Morty. My mom had been battling stage 4 metastatic breast cancer for a while. That night, she walked downstairs and just sat there with me until I decided to go to bed. I looked at her and in my heart I knew she was close to leaving. So I said goodnight, and she said goodbye, which confused me, until the next morning when my dad woke me up and told me she had passed away overnight. It still makes me wonder how we both knew. I am sorry to hear that she passed away, but it warms my heart knowing that you two sat together and enjoyed each other's company in her final hours. Rest in peace. Stay strong. Not me but my wife. I had a work friend who used to come over to smoke blunts and play Xbox. I liked the guy even though I knew he was a bit odd. He was really good at Call of Duty and rolled a means blunt. He used to tell some tall tales that everyone knew were bulls. Well, my wife, who was only my girlfriend back then, always got a creep vibe from him. She said he looked at her with so much anger and malice but never indicated any specific action that made her uncomfortable. After a while I stopped hanging out with the friend since he wasn't coming to town as much for work. Fast forward a few years and another mutual friend calls me to say the Xbox friend was killed by police. Unfortunately only after he had already killed his neighbor and his wife. Crazy. Horrible. I stopped being mates with someone due to them being incredibly angry on a regular basis for no significant reason. He never did anything horrific, but I'm not sorry I lost that friend. It isn't worth the risk. The woman who became my former best friend's stepmother. Met her and had instant alarm bells going off in my head that said keep away from her. I ignored them because come on. Friend's dad isn't an idiot and he dated her for a year. My gut was more than right. That woman made Cinderella's stepmother look tame. She would throw things at my friend's dad. She would scream at my friend. She blamed everything on my friend, even when there was no way she could prove it. She even verbally abused her own biological, autistic son. She once screamed at me, and when my mom confronted her she screamed at my mom. My friend was the scapegoat and virtually a slave. She called her lazy for being tired after working 2 jobs and going to college full time. She tried to get the Wi-Fi shut off so my friend would stop wasting her time playing on her computer all day when my friend was actually doing homework. She is a monster, and I'm pretty sure she's the reason my friend cut ties with me and all our mutual friends. She had to get away from anything and everything that reminded her of that monster. I hadn't spoken to a certain friend for a couple weeks but got a gut feeling to contact and talk to her at a certain moment. I immediately messaged her. That's how we always talk. We talked for a couple hours and into the night. A month later, out of the blue she just messages me thank you. I asked her why she's thanking me. She said she was contemplating suicide on the day I got my gut feeling and had contacted her. Because she got to talk to someone on that specific day, she dropped the idea and hasn't attempted it again ever since. Had a gut feeling my sister relapsed in her drug alcohol addiction. Through the pandemic, we usually talked about once or twice a month, but we went a couple months without talking. I put it on my schedule to visit her. Turns out, not only did she relapse, but beat up her daughter for money, tried to rob our parents. I'm sorry to read this. A good friend's sister has been battling for years and I'm constantly blown away by her behavior. The behaviors and words of an addict can be otherworldly. It changes people unlike anything I've ever seen. I hope you and your family get through this and help her recover. When my dad passed out in a bathroom at the airport, I told him to purchase an ED because they were selling them at the time at Sam's Club, 2007, for $1K. I just knew it was an arrhythmia and I was right. He died a month later and if he had his ED he might have survived. It was an arrhythmia. If it makes you feel any better, arrhythmia is a pretty broad term and there are a lot of non-shockable arrhythmias. I was driving a back highway and got the urge to pull off and explore a tiny strip mall with dollar store etc. When I got back in my car there was a nasty multi-vehicle crash that closed the whole 4 lanes. Could have been me. I was a 20-year-old student, alone in my apartment one evening. I was expecting the cable guy so when I heard a knock at the door I opened it. I saw an older man that definitely was not the cable guy as he did not have a uniform on. I asked him what he wanted. He said he was going around the apartments installing security alarms. I right away did not trust him and told him that his was a bad time and that my roommate was on the phone long distance, when long distance was expensive, with her parents and was going through some personal stuff. She was not there but I did not want him to think I was alone. He said where is she? I just closed the door in his face and said not a good time. I called my landlord the next morning and asked her about installing security alarms and she had no idea what I was talking about and did not authorize it. Woman, if you ever get into a situation where it looks like you are alone, really try to convince the person that is making you feel uneasy that you are not alone. Another time when I was young walking home in the dark and 2 men stopped their car and started saying lewd things to me. I just walked up to a house and knocked on the door and they drove off quickly. Way more vulnerable when you are alone. Few years ago my best friend's brother texted me and asked if I had seen her or heard from her. She didn't came home the day before. She had been depressed and suicidal before so everyone was worried. Her parents had checked her bank account to see if it was used and she bought some booze the day before. She rarely drinks so this was very out of character. They searched all night and decided to go to the police and file her for missing. Around that time her brother texted me and I right away had a feeling where she was so I grabbed my dogs and headed to the woods. There is this clearing with an old trailer where we used to let our dogs play and I saw her bike when I came around the corner. I knew she was in there but I was too scared to look so I called her brother to come. He was there within 5 minutes. I don't think he ever ran that hard and we found her together still breathing with a ton of booze bottles and pills laying around her. We called for an ambulance first, then I called her parents. They just left the police station and they took a ride with the police to where we were. She was in a coma for a few days with hypothermia. It was a very hard few weeks after that but she survived with no brain damage. If she was laying there a few more hours she would have been dead or her brain would have been damaged. I still don't know why I knew she was there. We haven't been there in years and she never talked about that place. Crap, it must have been because it was a good memory, or something. When I was a young woman my husband and I lived on a military base. At the time, the base was wide open and many local people used it as a shortcut from one town to another. The base also had free base newspapers available at many places on base. One week the newspaper said that facilities engineers, base maintenance, were going to begin installing attic fans in our townhouses. Sure enough, someone banged on my door later in the week and announced that he was there to install my attic fan. I was immediately suspicious. He was not military, dirty, scraggly beard, paint-stained clothes, but mostly it was my dog's reaction. Candy was a husky shepherd mix, so not a small dog. She'd put herself between me and him as best she could. Her hackles were up, and she was growling, the deep bass in the chest growl that you feel more than hear. I asked to see a work order and did. He said I don't need no freaking work order and yanked open the screen door. It was latched, but those kind of latches are meant to keep toddlers and dogs in, not grown men out. Candy roared and went for his throat. He jumped back and slammed the screen. I grabbed Candy, dragged her back, slammed and locked the door, ran to the back and slammed and locked that. Then I called the MPs. They came out, verified that my street was not due to get attic fans for a couple of weeks. and took all the information I could give them, which wasn't much. I never heard anything back, so they probably never identified him. 2 or 3 weeks later, the real installers came from facilities engineers, in uniform. They promptly produced work orders and did. Candy looked at them and went back to playing with the baby. I'm absolutely certain that she saved me from rape, possibly from murder. Frick yeah, Candy. School called us, and during the 100% online school times, and my class was freaking out cause why would they do that, and my gut feeling was telling me it could have something to do with my friend who has been offline for 10 days straight, and yeah, it was that. He died while visiting his dad in Serbia. Found a new flatmate had killed himself a week after moving in. I advertised a room on our national buy-sell page. A guy replies and we meet a few times. Really nice French guy, great English, stable job and into the outdoors. He moves in on the Saturday. We talk over the next few days for no more than 5 minutes and passing around the house during the day. Friday, Sat, Sunday come around and I have not seen or heard him, but his door is shut. Either he was working nights and we just didn't sync up. I joked with my partner that he was a drug addict and was dead, but we both laughed it off. I mean, what are the chances? Sunday evening I follow through with my gut that something wasn't right and knock on his door. Worst case he's asleep and I wake him. Best case, he's not there. He killed himself 6 days after moving in. Police estimate he had been cold for 3 days. He had been suffering from serious depression and planned it all out. I felt so guilty for not seeing it, but I barely knew him. Total of maybe 10 minutes talking total. Nothing you could do, mate. Sorry to hear about such a terrible moment in yours and his life. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.